On today's episode of Wrestling Changed My Life.
My self-talk was always positive, and I was obsessive, whether it was walking from class, whether it was in class when I should have been thinking more about class. It was running through positive thoughts in my head. It was going through techniques over and over, so I was just second nature all the time. When I was warming up before a match, I was like, I worked harder than this guy, I'm better than this guy, I'm smarter than this guy, I'm stronger than this guy, I'm more flexible than this guy, even if it wasn't even true.
Well, I was a fanatic. There's no doubt a fanatic. My goal was to get carried out of the wrestling room because of exhaustion, and it never happened. The thing it did for me every day about 6 o'clock is that when I got out, I looked back in and there was nobody else there. Bottom line was I didn't reach my goal. So guess what happened? I went back in the room again. But I got some quality time because of just some kind of a fanatic goal.
Welcome back to the show, folks. Today's episode is with Jesse Jantzen. Jesse won an NCAA title for Harvard in the mid-2000s and has since gone on to have a successful career in Wall Street and most recently started a cryptocurrency research firm. This guy's an absolute stud and has seemed to be successful in life and no matter what he does. So a lot of fun talking with him. Hope you enjoy the show. And as always, if you enjoy this episode, give us a rating on iTunes, subscribe to the show, and for past episodes, check out WrestlingChangeMyLife.org. Jesse, you're a man of many skills now. You're involved with crypto. You're a mini producer or wannabe producer, as you say on your social channels. But your foundation of who you are as a person most likely got started with wrestling. So maybe take us back to your childhood. What was it like, and how did you first get introduced to the sport?
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm excited about your podcast and future as it continues to grow.
Thank you.
And I don't know if I'm doing a ton of things or pretending to do a ton of things, but wrestling is the foundation of pretty much everything I do. So, a New York guy, growing up on Long Island, one of 5 kids, big family, and then my mother used to run a daycare out of our house with 15 other kids. So it was chaos, to say the least. Okay. And so I think we had wrestling matches within the house through the daycare. So we had training. We had a wrestling mat in our living room. And so we had basically a compound for training since I was young. Not really, but kind of. So my dad was a wrestler, and he introduced me to the sport like most wrestling families, pretty young. I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old or something like that. Mm-hmm. But we grew up, my brother and I, and even the girls, just kind of doing all sports. They exposed us to whatever you could. Everyone played soccer growing up. That's kind of the easiest thing for little kids to do. And baseball and track and field and wrestling and BMX and all these things. But my dad, being that was kind of a sport that he did in high school and college, that was his skill set. So he always said, it's a shame to waste your best skill set. It would be a shame not to share your skill set or your talent, your special talent, right? Mm-hmm. And I think parents kind of worry that they'll be overbearing and force things on their kids and overwork them, all these things. And my dad was perfect at kind of not putting that pressure, but at the same time introducing his skill to his kids so they had an opportunity to be great at something. So I think that's kind of where it came from. And wrestling's a funny sport. Once you're introduced, it's so emotional, it's so embarrassing, it's so painful to lose that most people either quit or get really addicted to it. It's like this obsessive thing. It's a hurt so good. So I for sure didn't like the feeling of getting beaten up or manhandled physically by another kid or man. Right. So I was obsessed.
When did you really fall in love with it, and when did things start clicking where this is all you wanted to do and you really started taking it seriously?
I continued to do all sports up until like 9th grade. I started soccer and baseball in high school and kind of stopped because I was doing wrestling year round. It seemed like that was my opportunity for maybe a scholarship. And wrestling at that time, I was probably the first generation of folks or second that really focused on specialized in sport. Mm-hmm. And you were weightlifting, you were cross-training, you were competing. I had 100 matches in an off-season in freestyle. You could wrestle cadet and juniors and have 15, 20 matches in a weekend. Right. So like you were nonstop competing and training, which can be good and bad. You can get burned out. Right. So around that time, but really it was the sport. Those other sports were so much fun, and I was actually pretty good at them, but I wasn't training and competing at those sports and putting the same time in. I was doing that kind of in off seasons and playing in games and practices, but it was really kind of all around wrestling. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like your dad really had it down in terms of the balance, because you see it all the time, I'm sure, with even when you were coaching, parents that are way too overbearing, and the kid doesn't love it and they get pushed out of it. But it seems like for someone who wrestled as much as you did, it was a perfect blend.
Yeah, my dad was so great at being positive, and I am not as good at that. Even with my younger brother Corey, who was this great talent in wrestling, and he was so good, and he still is. I can see myself getting frustrated. Versus my dad was just positive. I had bad matches. I was beat, and he would always come back with this level of positivity and, hey, let's go to the videotape. Oh, you did this really well, but this is where we had a problem. We can fix that. That's fixable. And it wasn't like, what are you doing? Like, you didn't wrestle your best. There's times I just didn't wrestle my best, and that's the frustrating part. If you got beat because the guy's better than you,
right,
what are you going to do? You did your best. The guy was just better. And there was times that happened. But even the times that it was like I didn't live up to what I should have, he was so good about it. And that was just like, there was times when I was burned out, and we've left tournaments midway through.
Really?
They weren't big tournaments. I wasn't leaving a national tournament. I wasn't leaving a qualifier. Right. They were off-season tournaments. Already had 50 matches. He's like, "How you feeling?" I was like this is the last place I want to be. And it wasn't it wasn't a sense of like quitting, because I grind through it. I've competed with the flu. I've had 4 workouts in a day. I've lost 30 pounds in like 3 days. Like, I've tortured myself plenty. Yeah. But he just knew. He knew that this isn't good long term. Right. Like, you should go. This is summer, and you're sick of this. And this is this is just a training tournament. It's not meaningful. We're out. Let's go. So I think that's special. I don't know a lot of guys, parents who were that good at being coaches, fathers, friends, and just having that balance. He's the best to ever do it. The guy was so good.
It's amazing. And I know you started endowment in his name, which is awesome.
At Harvard, yeah.
Yeah, at Harvard. You're being a little modest about your career. So, and we'll mention this on the intro, but you had an incredible run, 6-time state placer, 4-time state champ, freshman through your senior year. You were actually undefeated your 8th grade year as well. And then going into the state semifinals, you lost. Do you remember that experience?
Oh, yeah. I was so frustrated because it's funny. So insignificant in the grand scheme of your life.
Right.
Sports in general really are. I mean, shape your life important, but like, what are we doing? What are we affecting? It's very selfish. Like, we just some like arbitrary accomplishment. But I still have dreams about losses and what I could have, should have, would have, and things like that. You still, like everyone does. Like, they're just funny things that like when you put that much time into something and you want something so bad, like, it sticks with you. There's no doubt. So that year, I lost to a guy. He was just better than me at that time. Brandon Lehman. Tough.
Still knows his name.
Oh, freak, yeah. He was a 4-time state finalist. He should have been probably the first 4-time state champ before me in a single state tournament. He was really good. And I think he went to junior college NCAA, and just had he been focused and had maybe better mentorship. I don't know where he is now, but like, I'm sure he's a multiple Division I All-American kind of guy. He was good.
Right.
But he beat me, no doubt. I wasn't beating him that year. I think he was just, maybe I had my best match and things worked out. I could have beat him. But I think out of 10 matches, he's going to win most of those.
Okay.
So I'll let him have the better man that day. And that frustrated me. 7th grade, I should have won.
Really?
I was the best that year.
What happened?
I lost a really weird match in the quarters or semifinals to another state champ who's a great guy, but it was like a 1-0 match. I thought there was a questionable takedown. It was just not my best match. Right. Easily could have won that match. And then the guy that won, the transitive property, I think I had wins over him. So I think or did the guy I lose to win? I forget. But either way, I felt like that was my year to have that shot at the 5th. 7th was really within reach. 8th. I went up 2 weight classes. I think that he was tough. He was good. He got me.
And I know you've had some heartbreaking losses, as has anyone. Are there any in particular that stand out and really shape, you think, who you are today?
I think my junior year did I lose in the semis of the NCAA tournament?
Lines.
Yeah. I lost to him a couple times. It was always reasonably close. That stung because I went into school like thinking like anyone who has a big ego and is talented at high school and had a lot of success was like, I'm going to win every year.
Right.
Like I as a freshman, lost to Esposito, who's ranked 2nd in the country the first tournament. It was 4-3, and I thought I got screwed out of back points. I was like, I can win this thing. I'm a freshman. And then first year in academics at the college level at Harvard and like all this other stuff and doubt and being young and like, it just weighs on you. And then I had a pretty good year, but it wasn't great. I triple over or like double overtime with a guy that took 6th or 7th. So I was within reach to All-American, but it wasn't in the cards. But I would say sophomore year, I lost in the quarters. Frustrated the hell out of me because who won that year? Was it the year I beat Larkin and he was like ranked 1st?
Your sophomore year, Larkin beat Lawrence. I believe, and then you're.
Oh, so I had a win over Larkin, I think, my sophomore year.
Hodge winner, yeah.
Yeah, I had a win over him at Vegas. So I also thought I could have won that year. Yeah. So, like, I was in a mix. And those are frustrating because I was like, I hate wrestlebacks. Yeah. And I think the men are the men in the wrestlebacks, which is great.
Dude,
it's a great
beating Zadek your freshman or sophomore year in the wrestlebacks?
Yeah.
I mean, I know Percival upset him, but
I think my sophomore or junior year that happened, and that was the toughest wrestleback ever. I had to beat Billman. I had to beat Zadek. I had to beat Percival, who was smoking everyone that year. Then I had to beat Percival again the next year, who was a 4-time winner. Like, the wrestlebacks are always brutal, but
crazy.
Anyway, it's just always frustrating because it's like, wait, I can have like 2 more matches, I'm going to win this thing, or I got to have like 5. Right. And like against tough dudes that are either like have something to prove or you're done. So it's just like the wrestlebacks are a funny thing.
Yeah.
So probably those stung. And I was kind of the great hope for Harvard at the time. Like, there's no doubt I had pretty good academics, but they got me in there for a reason, all right?
Right.
I was kind of well-rounded, and I was, a pretty good talent in the sport. And I had to honor my side of the deal, which was to freaking win. and I'm sitting here like looking inside myself, going to my senior year. I was like, dude, this is it. I haven't won this thing yet. I was like, I got to freaking come through. Like, I felt like selfishly, I put a lot of pressure on myself, but I felt like for the university, like, they took a risk on me, and I'm honoring some things, but I got to win.
Yeah. I mean, that's cool you feel that kind of commitment to the school. I've never heard someone talk about it like that before. School
was so good to me, well, at least specifically to the athletic program. I mean, obviously they brought coaches in to make the team better overall, and they did a great job. We had amazing coaches. I mean, Kendall Cross was kind of on his way out, but he was there, like in and out, and he made a point to come in and train with me my first year and a half. Like, he would leave his job at Merrill Lynch, and he'd be working long hours as like a broker, and he'd come in and kick my butt. And that was huge.
Right.
I mean, Olympic champion, teach me, and with a style that was tough for me. He had a very tough style, a guy that was funky in the positions that I wrestled out of. It helped me so much.
Right.
Getting Brian Snyder, Jared Freyer, Dustin D'Annunzio staying around as an alumni who was just so good. Tough as nails. Never won a national title, but easily could have, and freestyle circuit really good. So I know that it's not a coincidence they were all about 149, 157.
Got it.
And that's my weight class.
So, yeah. And so maybe describe to people who aren't wrestlers, how tough is it, or how difficult is it to win an NCAA title? Because sometimes we throw that around so cavalier.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to you, and like how tough is it for people who don't know the sport?
I don't know. It seems super easy for some people. People are winning 3 and 4 left and right. I was like, for me, it was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I was third, first. I think I could have snuck an extra one in there, right? I was definitely good enough. I was I was a threat. So it's tough for a number of things. Like, a ton of us were talented enough, I think, to do it on a given day, right? But the stars have to align. You got to be healthy. You got to make it through a Division I college wrestling season and feel good and deal with injuries and all these things. My brother was ranked second or first at given times in the country and never All-American. And the kid was riddled with 6 different injuries and 4 surgeries and just concussions. And those, everyone's hurt, right? Those are excuses, but they're not. Like, it's timing, it's luck and opportunity. So I think it's just hard when you're perfectly healthy, right? There's such great talent, especially at the heart of the, I guess, the most popular weight classes between like 41 to 65.
Right.
And there's a ton of luck and timing involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so going in your senior year, you know that this is your last year. Yeah. Like, what's your self-talk like every day? Like, what are you thinking? Are you like in a state of fear, like I have to win it, or are you enjoying the moment? Maybe just talk us through what it was like your senior year.
I think if anyone tells you they don't have those self-doubt and those fear thoughts, they're completely lying. Like Mike Tyson used to say, as he walked into the ring before fights, he was like hoping that a light would fall on his head basically and kill him. Like, it was like, not exactly, but it was like, he's so good, I'm going to lose, I'm scared to death, But then when he stepped in the ring, he says, I'm a god, and I'm going to kill this guy. So it was like kind of like that. We all, as athletes in individual sport and combat sports and fighting, I think we all, if they were being purely honest, we do feel that.
Right.
Like all the time. But my self-talk was always positive, and I was obsessive, whether it was walking from class, whether it was in class when I should have been thinking more about class. It was running through positive thoughts in my head. It was going through techniques over and over, so I was just second nature all the time. When I was warming up before a match, I was like, I worked harder than this guy, I'm better than this guy, I'm smarter than this guy, I'm stronger than this guy, I'm more flexible than this guy, even if it wasn't even true. I'm better looking than this guy, my girlfriend's hotter than this guy.
Yeah.
I was like, you just brainwash yourself Conor McGregor style,
right?
Laws of attraction, and that helps. And then putting the time in gives you confidence, there's no doubt. The Iowa style of knowing you're just so prepared, it just automatically gives you confidence, right? And I overtrained for sure in college.
Really?
Well, Harvard was still developing. They had great coaches, and they did such a good job for helping me out. But I don't know what you should be doing or not doing. So I'm thinking of what is Oklahoma State and Iowa doing, and this and that, and they can't work. Harvard can't work like that because of our academic schedule. As I'm thinking, I'm like, well, they don't. Those guys don't have to worry about. They have great teachers and professors and academics.
Not the same though.
But there may not be, right? I mean, there's the university doesn't really do you any favors as an athlete.
Really?
You have to be really upfront, and this is just not a priority.
Right.
It's not like they don't like athletes. It's just whereas some other schools, they're revenue-generating sports.
Right.
So it's a whole different mentality.
Right.
There's not a single sport on Harvard's campus that's revenue-generating. Wow. Football, anything, nothing.
Right, nothing. And usually football.
It's an academic institution, right?
Right.
I mean, everywhere else in the U.S., there's football's revenue-generating. You know what I'm saying? So even wrestling programs, some probably are. So I guess the point was. Positive self-talk and just constantly, I had a little shift in my senior year. Going up to that, I felt like it was so much pressure. I was like, forget it. I'm just going to be more relaxed, and what's going to happen is going to happen. I kind of was listening to Jack Jantzen pretty much around 24 hours a day.
Right.
I was just kind of just chill out, just work hard, and this is going to happen. And just you've prepared your whole life for this. This is enough pressure. You can't put this on your shoulders anymore. So I kind of tried to have a little bit more of a laid-back mentality. I stayed up at 57 way longer. I dropped the weight because I was getting heavy. I was pretty lean at 175, and I was going down to 49. I was just take a little pressure off and wrestle the 57-pounders. Get the best competition. Picked up a loss at Vegas. And
Yeah.
But beat a lot of the top guys at 57 and had great competition and had a variety of different athletes. And it was... I love the model that we had that year, and my mentality was a little more relaxed. And I felt good pretty much throughout the year. I mean, a couple, bumps and bruises along the way, but
made it through. It's a long grind, man.
Yeah.
Crazy. So do you remember what a day in the life was like for you back then? When were you waking up? What was your morning training like? Do you remember how you structured your day?
Yeah, classes, the earliest class was usually 8 or 9, and so I always got a morning workout in, whether it was a lift or a drill or some form of wrestling on the mat. So I remember always, getting up, getting just a little bit of food in me, and hustling over to get the workout in. Whether it was a one-on-one with Snyder, just working on technique and then burning your lungs a little bit, or it was a lift. Then I had class most of the days. I had a 30-minute to 45-minute window before practice. I always took a nap. I'd throw a Seinfeld rerun on and just listen.
Hell
to it.
yeah, I love
always.
Seinfeld.
When Seinfeld was syndicated, it was on all day long on every channel. So I was just channel 11. I would just sit there and be like, "Oop, go to bed," and then go get ready for practice in the afternoon. And then hammer out work after practice, or get food with the team, have a good practice, and then hammer out work after that. And then I used to lift when we weren't having team lifts during the season. At that time, it was a different world. We didn't always have mandatory team lifts, and now I think they do all the time, and they do, yeah. So, and every dorm had a gym, so I would usually get work done, and then about 10 o'clock at night, I'd lift, and then I'd crush a lift, get a snack, and then go to bed. 3
workouts a day.
A lot, not every single day, but a lot of days. Yeah, a lot of days I'd do 3 in college. Jesus. I was working out a lot.
And so, if you can handle that kind of workload in college, competing at the highest level, is it almost easy for you to do that now in the professional life compared to some of these other guys you're working with here? We're in a skyscraper in New York, and these business guys think they work hard, but this is probably nothing to you. Do you ever feel that way?
Yeah, I think every wrestler wears that badge, and they're like, dude, okay, I had that academic schedule, I had that physical schedule, I had to cut weight. And then do it all feeling 60% half the time. Right. And then maybe get sick or whatever else. So I think that badge, there is something. It's kind of like a warrior mentality. It's like, the Navy SEALs, to think about their lives are at risk. I mean, when you have those experiences, I think they, when the going gets tough, it makes you strong. Right. And I can handle this. Right. However, it's much different. Physical suffering a lot of times is different than sitting in an office all day. There's guys that are just machines. They can sit at a desk for 20 hours and not move and code and do this. I was like, that's a different kind of exhaustion. That's a different kind of mental strength. Right. And that's way harder for me than just suffering all day physically. That's a good way to put it. I get stagnant. I get frustrated. I get ADD or whatever it is. Right. I'm just restless. Right. And I think a lot of athletes probably get that way. Okay. But there's some academics and these people that can just Their military level of being able to just focus mentally on specific tasks that necessarily aren't physically exhausting. But
right.
So I think it's a little bit of a yes and no. There's some people that can do things like that they crush me.
That you were getting, it kind of gets back to, you were talking to me earlier about how Joe DeCina at the Spartan races wanted you to get involved with that because obviously you're a physical guy. What was that story? You mind sharing that again with the listeners?
Yeah, it was a while ago now. I'm trying to think of the woman that worked for Spartan Race who reached out, but it was early days with Spartan Race. I think there was Tough Mudder.
Yep.
And what else was around during that time? There was.
They have like the Warrior Run, I think.
Was it Warrior Dash or Warrior
Warrior Dash.
Okay, so that was around.
Yeah.
So it was like 2 or 3. And Spartan was trying to disrupt, and they were the new game in town. And
right.
Joe had this great following and these cool races. And there was this guy, I wish I was more specific on this, but there was this cross-country guy that was dominating everyone at the time.
Okay.
And they needed some people that they could market against him and try to dethrone him.
Right.
And I was kind of set to potentially do this race. There was this article that came out, and we did an interview and all this stuff. And to be honest, I freaking wussed out. I was just distracted at work at the time. I was trading a long short equity at a family office,
right,
and kind of getting my career started. So I was just like, I don't know. I mean, I can't let sports derail me, and I'm gonna get crushed by this dude. He's the endurance stuff. He's gonna crush me. Anything
right.
with physical, the pulling, the pull-ups, the pushing, the
you'd kill
explosives. I felt that way, but
right.
I think it was a longer race too.
Yeah, that's a crazy guy, DeCina. He's had some interesting podcasts with Tim Ferriss, and I think he was even on.
And Tim was a wrestler too, Long Island guy.
Yeah. What? Did you wrestle with him?
No, because he went to a private school, I think outside of Long Island. But I have.
Oh, that's right. He did. He went to a boarding school.
I haven't chatted with him in length, but he wrestled I think in high school, and that was pretty much it. And he grew up in East Hampton though, and then went away, and then was at Princeton, but obviously wasn't involved with wrestling in college. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. Okay. And so the biggest part of this podcast is the wrestling stories, which are awesome, but also, how it shaped your life and what you're doing now. So talk us through, after 2008, you made a run at the Olympics, you had some injuries, but, what have you been doing since then? And kind of just talk us through your professional life since.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was training for the 2008 Olympic trials, I had, I tore my foot, had this big surgery on my foot and this injury, and I was like, well, I got to prepare for life after wrestling. I said, I figured 2004, 2008 would be my 2 shots, and then, if I medaled, hopefully gold, then I would retire and move on. So right. When I was hurt during that time period, I was coaching at Harvard and training at the Olympic Training Center and traveling at competitions for the New York Athletic Club. A guy named Joe Perella, who was a Lehigh graduate, not a wrestler, but a huge wrestling fan, and very famous M&A banker, investor.
Yep.
And he's a big supporter of Lehigh wrestling and a great guy. I consider him, whether he knows it or not, a mentor, and idolize the guy. This classic Italian guy who's kind of this great story. Grew up in Union or Newark, New Jersey, and from a big Italian family. Went to Harvard Business School, was in the Air Force, and then just became this legendary banker. And at the time, it was 2007 or 2006. He had left Morgan Stanley. He had a company he started with a guy named Bruce Wasserstein. Ran that for a while, left, they kind of separated, went back to Morgan Stanley, and then was leaving to start this thing called Perella Weinberg Partners with his other partner, Peter Weinberg.
Okay.
And they had 15 employees. And I met him at the NCAA wrestling tournament when I won, 2004 in St. Louis.
Okay.
He came to our Harvard box that we had there and introduced himself and said, hey, Jesse, I'm so impressed. Congratulations. It's amazing. Here's my business card if you ever need anything, if you ever want a job or to learn more about the banking world.
Wow. And
I was young and dumb and a meathead, and I was like, oh, thanks, guy. I don't know who this guy is, And I was just kind of I'm going to train and do whatever. But I didn't lose the card. and I was told, it's a good one to keep.
Yeah.
And I reached out. I was like, hey, Joe, I don't know if you expected this or not, or you were just being a nice guy. But I just broke my foot. I don't know. I'll be out for a year and a half or longer. I think I need to learn some stuff about life. Can't just learn about collar ties anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, unless that's going to pay me a lot of money and support my lifestyle, family, and everything else. So he was like, hey, this is not bad timing. We just started this company. It's about 50 employees. We're going to grow it, but maybe you can intern and learn and blah, blah, blah. So I'd work with them. Whether it was less than a year or so, kind of interning and learning as a banking analyst and watching them build this great company, which is now, 2,000 employees or something like that.
No
and
shit.
Asset management, advisory, and they had a hedge fund, and they had Were
you a finance guy in college?
I was government and sociology, so no. But I know most of the people that are like these rock stars in finance. Not that I'm a rock star, but they are, history majors and all this stuff. So it's important. Like I think you should have an economics background. If I had to do it again, I would have only taken ec classes, and I would have been more focused on exactly what I want. But I don't know. I didn't even think I was going to an Ivy League at all. Like my mom didn't go to college, and she was a really smart woman. But it was just the emphasis was getting good grades, but it wasn't like you're going to an Ivy League school. We're breeding you to do this.
AP, all this shit.
I mean, I was in AP classes, but I just like knew that you had to do. I just like to compete. Maybe it was vanity. I just wanted to win, and so. But I didn't know I didn't have a formula for how to be a banker from going to the Ivy League school to do this and that.
Right.
And then once I went through the process, I tried to pass down the knowledge to other siblings and stuff. But it wasn't like. And a lot of people don't have that. But a lot of people I was in school with for sure had that.
Right.
I mean, they were groomed to know, this is what you have to do to get to this point.
Right. And so you got involved with this guy, and then...
so I worked for a while, but knowing that I was going back to compete and train. So I finally healed up after kind of a debacle with this injury that was misdiagnosed and treated.
Yep.
And then I started competing again. And... Then, I wrestled in the Olympic trials. I had some big wins right back. I beat Freyer, who was the ranked 2 at the time, and beat Schwab a bunch, and all these other guys, the 2 Olympians, right? And just didn't get my stride back. I was huge. I got so heavy. It's like almost 180 probably to get back to 45. And
my God.
And then I was just struggling to get the weight down, and then it just kind of shook me up a little bit. And then going into the 08 trials, I ended up losing to Larkin and was kind of banged up before. So,
was that
but
to come back from?
It was frustrating. Yeah, it was harder at the time. I was just compartmentalizing it, but it's hard. It's hard to walk away when you are, essentially not getting professional athlete salary, but you're a professional athlete. That's what you're doing for a living. You're just competing.
Yeah.
And then, and you fell short kind of what the ultimate was. You sacrificed 4 years to say, this is why I'm doing this. And then you don't really have anything to show for it other than, in the end, you have a lot of lessons, a lot of life experience, which is invaluable. Right. But,
it's tough.
It's always better to win. It's always better to win. Definitely. I always like the people say, there's always the silver lining lessons. I was like, yeah, those are good, but it's nice to win. Right. So it was for sure an adjustment. It stinks,
Right.
If you talk to anyone who's set something and didn't quite get there, there's always going to be a little emptiness.
Right.
You'll find it in other things and you'll have great success. But you got to mourn that loss and you got to fuel that with other healthy habits and goals.
Right. How do you think about goal setting? That was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because obviously you're a very driven person. You've succeeded a lot in life. Do you set goals for yourself? And just kind of walk us through that process. Yeah,
I mean, that's how I was kind of raised, as far as having the goals in your face at all times so you can't avoid them. And I think I was self-motivated. Wrestlers are generally really self-motivated. Individual sport. Not that team sport athletes are not self-motivated, but I'd write them all down. I'd have a document or an Excel spreadsheet kind of planning out the year, knowing things I wanted to hit in targets. I'd have really short-term goals as well, daily goals. And then I'd have weekly, monthly, and then ultimate goals, which is state champion, how many times you want to be state champion, national champion, and benchmarks at what time period you want to accomplish these goals. And I've gone through 2 different things. At one point, I was so obsessive about it. One of my coaches was kind of the opposite, a little more hippie aspect. He was like, well, try to open my mind to accomplishing goals that weren't as specific, but more about just self-improvement, and which I think Penn State maybe does a great job at. Now I don't know exactly how they do it, but they just have this fun aspect of wrestling and improvement, and it seems to work really well.
God, they wrestle loose, don't they?
Yeah, and I didn't have that. I just knew you're going to work your ass off, and you're going to hit these benchmarks.
Right.
Which works too, no doubt. But anyway, that's kind of how I looked at it. There was these daily, weekly, nothing too novel, but I had them everywhere. They're written in my ceiling for bed. They're on my door. They're on my computer. It was just I couldn't avoid these things. So.
Seriously, you wrote them on even the ceiling, or you had them taped up on the ceiling? Or
pretty much at times. I don't know if it was always that case, but they were everywhere. So you really couldn't wake up and stare yourself in the mirror or wherever without being okay, I gotta get up and bake the donuts. It's time. So,
right. Do you still do that now with your professional life?
I do. I don't really tape them anymore, but I have them. Right. Now with the modern technology, it's a little easier to be less obvious about that stuff.
Sure.
But whether it's for a new company, it's what 3 things do we need to accomplish this week?
Right.
What 3 things did we do well last week, or did we do poorly last week? And then kind of focus on getting to these things and having an effect.
Okay.
So yeah.
Interesting. I just love different people's takes on it because everyone has a different way to do it. Some people focus on, hey, a goal shouldn't be an outcome you can't control. Like winning, technically you can't control, but you can control the process of getting up to that, right?
Yeah.
You can control, waking up, working out, controlling your diet, and so forth. So maybe those should be the goals, and the outcome is just a byproduct of that. Or some people say, no, you got to know and visualize yourself winning the nationals or taking a company public. So
I like a combination of both, and I do think it's probably healthier to not focus on the outcome all the time because that obsessive nature of it, and if you do fall short, it's devastating. It's just so devastating because you've built that up. Like you can't have happiness without it. Right. I think there's a sense of that sometimes, and which isn't the case, right? Again, these are meaningful things, but they're not really that meaningful. Glory is fleeting. Yeah, you won a national championship. Whoop-de shit. The globe doesn't care that much about that. Right. I mean, people care, but it's really about you. It's about how did you feel? You put that much time in, and you got this sense of accomplishment. Right. But I do think that there is something to having the outcome goal up there too. Like I want to win this, and this is what I need to do.
That's what you want to freaking do. Like you know what I mean? Like they can. It's to your point. Maybe it's softer. It sounds nice to just care about the process, but at the end of the day, and you want to freaking win.
Well, and guess what? All you're doing is kidding yourself because that's why your short-term goals. You know why you're doing this because to get to that.
Right.
It's all right. You didn't write it, or you're not saying that's what you're looking for, but you are. Right. You know. All right. You're not going to say it or write it down, but you know.
Right.
So what's the difference? Put it up there, and just know at the end of the day, if for some reason it doesn't work out, you'll get up the next day and you'll have your family or friends or your life and you'll be fine.
Right.
But you want to chase that like there's nothing else. Otherwise, you can't be the best in the world at something. Right. It's got to be everything to you because that mentality is really the only way to get there.
And you're thinking about it all the freaking time. You're visualizing it. You're obsessing about it. I mean,
I am, but now I don't know. I wonder if when I have kids, hopefully, how I will instill the values to get things that they want in life, and there is definitely a level of obsessiveness that's probably unhealthy, and maybe that can pull them away from those goals. I don't know,
right?
But it's definitely a way to get there. So it's hard. I think it's also really depends on the individual. True. So much, right? I mean,
yeah, because you've seen it go wrong for sure, like with parents and the kids literally who I used to coach who are normal, nice kids in 8th grade. Their dad just drives them to the freaking wall, and maybe wrestling of all sports. You have the crazy parents. I don't know. Maybe it's in all sports, but it definitely is in wrestling, and it's a shame, to see that happen.
It's really apparent in wrestling. I think because of the emotionality. Like I've sat in a corner with family and on the other end, and it's like you're saying and doing things you never imagined. Like, what am I doing? This is just this match.
Especially with your brother, right? How hard is that to coach your brother?
So hard. I mean, it's so much easier to compete, right? Because you want the best for them, and you get. But he was so good, and it was not. I mean. You
guys are really close, right?
We are really tight. So
he's a freak, man. I was looking at his getting ready for this, his social profile. The guy's a specimen, man.
He's in good shape. That's why I gotta work out. I can't stand next to that guy shirtless. But he was a really good athlete. More natural than I was. I think I'm strong and fast, but he's just for a feel for all sports picked things up really quickly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know we have not that much time left here, so moving just a couple questions I've sourced from some buddies here. Well, first of all, you're big into crypto now. Not sure how you got into that, but what are some of the biggest misunderstandings about cryptocurrency and blockchain, just for the layman, so to speak? That it's
it's fraudulent Ponzi scheme that all it's used for is sex trafficking and money laundering. So I think that's undoubtedly. There's bad actors in this space, and there were over the past 2 years, like there were in the hedge fund world, in the pump and dump schemes of the IPO days in the 90s, the Chinese IPO boom happens in every other thing. I mean, every other industry, multi-level marketing companies that toe the line of certain things. So I think that is misunderstood because the amount of dollars that are being used for unlawful acts or exceed anything done in the token economy by a huge margin. Okay. You think about, the drug trade and deaths and what people have done with actual U.S. dollars.
Right.
It doesn't even compare.
Far exceeds it.
Yeah. Right? So I think that's a major misconception. I think it's also a misconception is this is the great panacea. It's going to cure every problem we have in our economy.
Right.
Not necessarily the truth. I think My involvement came from friends of mine getting exposure in the industry. Like Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss were classmates, and I consider good friends now. Obviously, Mike Novogratz has gotten involved, even from his days at Fortress, the hedge fund, when they actually were public about having a little bit of exposure to Bitcoin. And at first, I was really hesitant, being a traditional markets guy, being like, how do you custodian this? It's not really backed by anything. What's the utility of it? I'm not an engineer, developer, or that great with tech. So it took me, I was such a slow study to really understand, well, how can this apply to a lot of things we do, whether it's contractual stuff, whether it's, the transfer of value or store of value.
Right.
I think that it will have great utility for a lot of things. It will not have application for everything.
Okay.
And when you think of the internet and those protocols starting in the 70s with ARPANET and where that came, it took 30-something years for it to really come. I think for this adoption, it should be a lot faster because we have the software and hardware in place, the infrastructure there for this to be adopted. But our grandmothers need to know how to transfer some Bitcoin pretty easily for it to be, broadly accepted probably, or something of that nature, whether it's Bitcoin or not. Like it needs to be a little bit easy. The ease of use needs to. It just needs to be easier and more available for the adoption to happen, I think.
In your company you're working with now, or you founded, correct me if I'm wrong, you founded a company that's in this space now?
Well, it's not 100% released yet, but I'm partnering with a company that is doing, I would call media and content in the space for education, kind of, blockchain 101, and partnering with...
Which I think is definitely needed.
Yeah, for the retail side of business, sure. I mean, institutions are pouring in because they love to speculate. They love to trade. They love to wrap fees around things. And they do believe that this could be the next, the third or fourth internet, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And they don't want to miss it out in the party. But at the end of the day, if it's not really being used, but people want to trade it and speculate it, they're still making money.
Right.
Whereas the retail folks want to make money, but they're going to they want to use it for something. They want to pay for their Uber ride with it, or they want to, instead of Venmo, the Venmo's using the blockchain instead, or something like that. Like that's when real adoption is going to happen, in my opinion. And we want to be positioned to be the first person you go to for information.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
No, that's great. And next question is, so you're involved with Beat the Streets, which is one of the most fantastic programs I've ever seen. Maybe talk a little bit about that and the event you, what you can share, the event you guys have coming up, and how people can support that.
Yeah, so Beat the Streets, I think it's my third year on the board, and now one of the co-chairman or vice chairman, now that Mike Novogratz is still going to be involved but stepping down, who's served 12 years, selflessly, and pretty much grew this organization with Al Bevilacqua to being literally the premier youth development organization in the world, and maybe the premier wrestling event in the world. We wrestled Iran in Grand Central Station during really tough diplomatic times with that country. But guess what? Sports are diplomacy, and we made it happen. Cuba, Russia, kind of a world all-star team. So, what we do, we have 3,000 athletes under the umbrella of Beat the Streets. We provide them with... Is
this just New York or all of them?
The 5 boroughs, just New York. Now it's a national organization, so there's ones popping up all over the U.S. and the world now. But for our organization in New York, there's about 3,000 kids, give or take, and boys and girls. And our girls program has been growing immensely over the past 2-3 years. So our big thing is giving kids a wrestler's education, kind of what this podcast has been about, is how does it affect you, through life lessons and, the ability to transition and pivot and have a great career and a great life. We want everyone to have exposure to that because we think those lessons are like no other sport can offer. Right. And the opportunity to get scholarships and get into the Ivy League school and all these things that, I'm a great story for that. Right. I'm not coming, I had a very happy, healthy home, but, we weren't very wealthy and we didn't really have a clear vision of going to this great academic school, but wrestling was really my gateway to that. And I hope these kids, and we're seeing some of our kids have that. And we provide mentorship, gear, training, travel to tournaments and camps and all this stuff.
Yeah, their first state champ this year or last year.
A few years ago now, 3 I think, right? Brandon Nunes.
Yeah,
I think he was. I think that's 2 or 3 now.
Amazing though to see that.
Yeah, so great. And we have some Ivy League athletes. We have it's doing the intention. It's happening like what we intended to do.
Right.
And back to the benefit or our annual event, which kind of raises most of our budget for the year. we do this great dual meet outside on the streets of New York City. It's gritty, it's great, and we have this great marketing exposure because we have people walking by Times Square to see our great sport. And this year, I can't share too much, but we're thinking of doing something to embrace the broader MMA combat sports world, and put on this great dual meet that will be in like a very famous arena of some kind, and have a lot of MMA celebrities, and really embrace the culture of just the fight world, because we're all fighting for success, life, everything. So
I can't wait to see it. And I'm starting to get involved a little bit with Beat the Street Chicago. It's fascinating. Chicago's a wrestling hub, but actual Chicago city limits, the public schools, have hardly any wrestlers, which is insane. And there's the suburbs have some great programs, nationally ranked programs, but it's just shocking to hear that when I started getting engaged with these guys in Chicago, how few of wrestling programs are in the public school system.
Yeah, I mean,
shocking.
It's the exact same thing of New York. Like, traditionally, New York City wrestling has been terrible. Why? Because there's no culture. And wherever you create a culture and there are great athletes, you can have good wrestling. It's really just a work ethic thing on top of just good mentorship and coaching. And that was the idea. Why not? It's not an expensive sport. I mean, it's not. You don't need the ice hockey gear and ice time. Like, that's expensive to buy that stuff unless your school's paying for that or you're going to private school. Wrestling is you just kind of show up at a gym if there's a gym. You maybe pair of wrestling shoes, and most of the times you get those for free from someone, So, like,
for sure.
I think it's an affordable sport. I think it's a culture, inner city kids that are struggling, whether it's from broken homes or whatever it is. Like, there's a fight culture, and you are ready. You're fighting every day, and I think wrestling's a perfect fit. So we're trying to do that, but it's a cultural thing. You have to build culture, and how do you do that? It's just exposure and great coaches. You have to have good mentors and coaches.
Okay. No, that's awesome. And then two more for you before we let you go here. The first is, wrestling just seems this way. Teaches mental confidence, mental strength, discipline. Is that something people can learn who aren't in the sport? And if so, how do you think they can do that? Like, what's the best way to learn mental toughness and improve your discipline? Yeah,
it's a great question, and I talk to people about this actually often, and it's not an easy answer. That's why I think about, when you have kids, how do you learn that toughness? Like, I think you can get it in a number of ways through life experience, right? Whether it's like my one nephew, he'll never wrestle because he is anaphylactic to all these food allergies, and you're grabbing and sweating on someone, he'll have a reaction and his throat will close. But he had surgery when he was 5 months old. He has thyroid disease, and he's been pricked and pinned and all this stuff every day of his life, but he's this hardworking, brilliant kid who's smart and works hard, and this adversity has made him so tough. Like, you see him, nothing really phases him. And I have another nephew who's like a lot more emotional and dramatic, didn't have those experiences, and I think a sport like that will help him for his level of toughness and stuff and grinding through certain things. So I think life experience is it, how you're raised. I think wrestling is a good shortcut. I mean, immediately the lessons and the way the sport is, whether it's weight management and just the fight and the work, just the intensity of these workouts, the structure, the discipline. I think the military does an amazing job at that, right? And I don't think I want to put people in harm's way with their lives to learn those lessons, but obviously it does, right? So, like, I think there's a million other sports that will, a lot of times individual sports kind of do that, right? Because you're out there alone.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I do. A lot of parents ask. They're like, "Oh, I want to toughen my kid up, but what should I do?" And I was just like, well, spend time with them. One, teach them the right life lessons. Don't hand everything to them. Make them work. And it doesn't have to be wrestling, but it's a good way to find those things through the sport. The sport teaches you those. And
I love the idea of some type of mandatory Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, judo progression, maybe through like elementary school. Not even in like a competitive way where you're making them cut weight and all that, but just teaching them that, letting them go hand to hand every day. It's good for their confidence. Because I mean, you know how it is. Like 9 times out of 10, if someone comes up and messes with you, you're gonna destroy them. So you walk around with that confidence innately. And so if there's some way to get that with kids, where you're not making them cut the weight and not making them wear the singlet. Singlet's probably the biggest two things.
Yeah, that people don't like. And I think that's fine. I think the singlet's dated. I think even the more modern singlets don't look as much like singlets anymore.
Do you like the fight shorts and the compression top that Flo's doing?
I do. I don't like the fight shorts because they're baggy. I'd rather them be spandex because your hands and fingers. I don't like it getting caught. And though in fighting they do bag your shorts. I don't know. I do agree with you. I said the the type of confidence you get paired with humility is just second to none. And like, you do walk into a business meeting, not that you're like this ego guy and you're going to knock someone out, but you know that you can handle yourself physically in any way, shape, or form in most rooms you enter at all times. And people, you're small because you're a wrestler, and people like always underestimate you. Right. So you have this like inner arrogance that really does help you in a lot of other aspects of life. It's such a carnal, like meathead way of thinking, but it does. It's like true. You feel like I can handle myself. I have good body awareness. I know body positioning. I know where to step here, here, and here, and just know to be safe. Right. Or it helps you learn other things physically when you get older in sports. So like, I love that, and I felt like I love baseball. And if all I did was play baseball, maybe I could have played at a high level somewhere, and that would have been cool. Yeah. But at the same time, I would have missed out on all those other lessons. I think because I don't know if I would have learned that through baseball.
Dude, thank God you didn't. That would have been freaking crazy. Last thing for me is obviously the theme of this podcast: wrestling changed your life, changed my life. If you just kind of had to summarize in a couple sentences, and I know we've hit on this a little bit, but if a parent asked you, why would my kid wrestle, or another way to look at it is, what life lessons does it teach you? Like, how would you summarize that in a couple sentences to really, really drive home the fact?
There's so much, right? I mean, I don't know why I just love confidence and humility, and then a lot of people don't have that. It's just inner arrogance you get. It's the ability to handle yourself in any situation. It's really overcoming adversity. Everyone is going to be faced with adversity. Tom Brady, the greatest ever, handsome guy. It doesn't seem like he's got anything going wrong in his life. Yeah. For sure has had adversity, right? So like everyone's going to have that, and like wrestling teaches you how to roll with the punches really better than anything, especially if you get to a certain level. And even getting touched for a short period of time, you learn these lessons. I talk to people that I run into in the gym, oh, you must have wrestled. They're like, oh, I wrestled for 2 years in junior high, but everything I do in work, I think about wrestling every day.
Changed my life, they'll say.
Yeah, I mean, studio head at like Warner Brothers. He wrestled for like a year, and he was just like, oh my God, I think about how tough that sport is. Toughest sport in the world. And I think about how, even doing it that brief time, the respect I have for a wrestler.
Joe Rogan talks about that. He did it for 1 year. Right. He was obsessed with it.
Yeah, so it's something special about it. And I think I love that the MMA community is growing, and for that, it's making wrestling more popular and all these things. So for a parent, I don't know. I think it's just work ethic, discipline, humility, confidence, but the ability to, like, whether you have a family or work or whatever it is, like the ability to overcome within a single match or practice the adversity is going to be thrown at you nonstop. It's a hurt so good. It's an unforgiving sport. Yeah. And if you can come out of that and just survive it, and
you throw on top the weight cutting, for better or worse, doing all that while cutting weight is like just an insane level of pain.
And I hate that we but it's true though.
It's true.
But it sucks to kind of mention weight cutting, because I think that's the one thing that like people really don't like, right? It's for parents especially.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, the things I think about when I was so dehydrated or not eating, I was like, when I go through something tough, it's just like, this is a joke. And I did that voluntarily. I wasn't like a prisoner of war.
For no money.
What kind of crazy person does this, is willing to drink and eat things that just I won't even share on the air? Right. But like, that was voluntary. Right. That was a commitment, because I was so committed. So like, if you go into a boardroom and you're like, I did that voluntarily, I will get this done, and we will win. We will make this company. We will sell this company for whatever it is. We will build this company. That's a joke. Right. Are you kidding me? So like, there is that like arrogance or confidence being like, dude, I went through that, and I wasn't sent there by the military. I just chose to do that because I'm an animal. I'm an animal. So I'm not just saying me, but I just like, there is something to that too, maybe. Yeah.
Right on, brother. Well, hey, appreciate you coming on, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That's the end of this episode, but definitely not the end of the show. For more episodes, please go to wrestlingchangemylife.org. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Give us a star rating. Show the love, baby. Show the love. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. Peace.